Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. If you're the kind of angler keen on learning new fisheries and angling opportunities, today's guest is going to make a compelling argument on why you should be adding Virginia to your to-do list for fishing adventures. Grant Alvis of Virginia is somebody that I've had the pleasure of fishing with on several occasions. And if not for guys like Grant and our mutual friend Josh Dolan, I may have never known how diverse that Virginia's rivers, lakes, and coastline can be. And I gotta admit it, before meeting these guys, Virginia was never even a blip on my radar. But the images of the fish these guys are pulling out of Virginia waters will stop you in your tracks and make you take a very real look at your calendar, your finances, and your vacation time. Alvis spends the course of his year working the Chesapeake Bay for world-class redfish. I'm talking 50-inch plus redfish, moving in mass migration for some of the most incredible angling opportunity in the entire country. And he's catching these things on fly. He's catching them on lures. He's catching them from my kayak. They're just enjoying these world-class monster fish every which way you can imagine. And just a ways inshore are the unique tidal marshes that stand virtually unchanged since the birth of our nation. Historically significant with abundant wildlife and fishing opportunity. And maybe most unique among them are the relative newcomers to the marsh, the northern snakeheads. And Grant has established himself as one of the premier snakehead fishermen in Virginia, if not the entire nation. And the two of us share a common passion for the pursuit of bowfin, where he opts to chase them proactively with lures and flies. And just a short trek upriver, we discuss what might interest me on a personal level the most. Their opportunity each year to follow a shad migration upstream to hundreds of monster flathead catfish that can be sight fished with artificial lures in rapids. Now, this is incredibly badass stuff, and it's something that I personally hold very high on my list of angling opportunities and experiences that I have got to try. And a westward trek into Virginia's mountains along river systems unbroken are trout streams, opportunities at smallmouth bass and musky. And Virginia as a whole is just an underrated fishing scene. And it's a scene that I think stacks up to any fishery in the United States. And Grant is just a great steward of his fishery and an awesome guest to come on and sell you the idea of fishing in Virginia. This is Grant Alvis of Virginia.
But, let's get into it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'll start by apologizing that it took so long.
We're good.
But anyway, you've kind of been like an obvious pick when I was starting this whole podcast, because like I'm trying to bring more guys on that are well-rounded anglers and that do unique styles of fishing, or might have like some angle to their pursuits that other people might find interesting or didn't know existed. And you and Josh both, y'all are kind of a good case in point for me, because up until the point that I came up there and fished with y'all, Virginia would have never been on my radar. I didn't think Virginia had anything. It's too ignorant. Didn't know.
Then I mean, truthfully, if you look at like what you see on TV and stuff like that, other than one or two of the rivers, I mean, you don't really hear about anything, because I mean, the only thing you really have media-wise is like some professional bass series come here. Like the James River is known around the country, and then the Potomac, but the Potomac it doesn't get the press that the James does, because they put all those Florida fish in the James, so the James has some giants in it now.
Yeah. Well, y'all have such a diverse fishery, from like where it's like mountain, and I'm going to sound like an idiot because I'm talking about your waters.
Yeah.
But I mean, I look at your photos and it's like, I kind of envy that style of fishing where you're very like seasonal. You know what I mean? It's like you can do so many different kinds of fishing throughout the year, from trout fishing to musky fishing to the snakeheads and the bowfin and the gar, and then you like as you're moving towards the coast,
and all the saltwater too. I mean, it's like I've told you, I've told a lot of people. There's very few places in the world that are catered to an angler. I mean, not just freshwater, but just an angler in general, like Richmond, Virginia does. I mean, that's hometown. I live just east of there, but an hour and a half from my door to the west, I can catch native brook trout that have been there forever, since the ice age or beginning of the ice age, whatever.
Yeah.
And an hour and a half to the east, I can catch gigantic cobia, huge sharks. I mean, we get big greater hammerheads up in the bay in the late summer. And then, I mean, I've never caught one, but they are there. We see them when we're cobia fishing. And then the largest red drum on the planet. I mean, that's really the cobia and the stripers were what the bay was always known for. And it's still known for big stripers. They're coming back, but we've got a whole lot of issues with like a commercial fishing fleet that's taken the bunker and all that stuff. But the new poster child for the Chesapeake Bay and what's really bringing people there is these just colossal red drum that we have.
I feel like in for the purpose of this conversation, like I'll be honest, I think that is probably like that is like a bucket list fish for me. Like that is the number one thing I want to come up there and do with y'all is those giant red fish.
It really is ludicrous, man. I mean, you like everyone knows, the world record was caught in North Carolina as 94-pounder. And that's back when you could kill them. You can't kill them anymore if they're over, I think they're federally protected over 40 inches. I think the only place you could kill one that big might be like Louisiana or somewhere in the Gulf, but I know they're federally protected. I mean, that's what made them rebound so much. But like, I mean, it's just crazy. The world record was caught in North Carolina, but it was caught in November. That's a migratory Virginia fish that, or, however you want to consider it. Our big giant drum are migratory. Yeah. They show up every year, late March, early April, hang out all summer long, get fat and happy, gorge on bunker, blue crabs, and whatever else they want to eat. And then turn around, they spawn early fall, like September, October, and then head back south. And they've got some tag data to show that like a lot of our fish make their way all the way to Charleston, and then they like hang out in Charleston and then U-turn and come right back.
Yeah, I was thinking, that's like probably the most interesting fish I wanted to pick your brains on is these red fish. And I'm thinking like when we first started this conversation, I'm like, I think I want to start with like the musky and trout in the west and work our way gradually during the conversation to that. But rather, let's start on the coastal fishing and we'll work our way west. Y'all multi-species guys, it's so hard for me to like not bounce around because you do so much. And I think that's what I appreciate out of you as an angler is that you've got all these opportunities in your backyard and you have made the decision not to limit yourself and become a one-trick pony. It's like you're taking advantage of all opportunities, and it's awesome.
I joke about that a lot. I tell people all the time, I was like, I'll be called a lot of names. I'll never be called a one-trick pony. Like, you can never say I only fish for one thing or I only know how to do one thing.
No, like, the idea of doing that like keeps me up at night. That like you would have this incredible opportunity right outside, like within an hour and a half commute of you, and make a conscious decision, like a choice, to deprive yourself the opportunity or the experience of catching that.
It's like being a bass fisherman and like going down the James, running up the Chickahominy, this huge, it's one of the northernmost cypress swamps in the world. Running into this cypress swamp, flipping cypress trees for bass, and you see a 10 or 12-pound bowfin swimming down the bank, and you're just like, oh, I'm not going to cast in that. What? Like, why? Right. Why would you not do that? And I don't know. I don't understand these guys that pick one species, and it typically is pretty vindictive. Like, it's typically bass and catfish guys. They're the ones who like fish for one thing. And I'm like, I mean, it's fine, but
I am thoroughly convinced. Like, let's say you do want to be the best bass fisherman in your neck of the woods. It just seems like it would like behoove you to become intimately familiar with all the competitive species and like how the environment as a whole operates.
I've always said fishing for other species makes you better at fishing for everything. I mean, there's days where I'm fishing for one thing and I'll be like, oh man, this fish does that too. Or like, oh, they're doing this just like this fish does. And like, sometimes you'll see fish in saltwater doing the same thing that fish in freshwater do, like the way they post up in current and stuff like that. I mean, it's people are really they're doing themselves a huge disservice by sticking to one species. Really
Yeah.
are.
Well, it's also interesting how one fish will move the other out of an area during different seasonal time frames. Like, okay, the presence of largemouth means the absence of this, or the presence of this means my largemouth have moved out here. But
Yeah, we've
anyway,
got a couple streams where like trout and smallmouth share the boundary. So you'll have
yeah,
like trout will scoot down a little farther in the wintertime because it's getting cold. And then, they're getting farther away from like the natural springs that feed the river. And then as the summer gets here, that water down here is getting a little warmer. And then you start seeing the smallmouth creeping up the line further and the
yeah.
trout get all pushed up. I mean, I don't know. It just goes back to Virginia to being such a diverse place. We've got such crazy fisheries. It's one of those things. It's like I want to tell everybody it sucks so nobody comes here, but
Yeah.
it's too good not to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think as far as like seeing your catches, the one for me, the eye appeal is those giant redfish. And I know I came up there one time to make a stab at it. Conditions weren't right. We had a narrow window. But that's a fascinating one to me because I think about like where I've caught redfish or where I've seen redfish. And it's like I like see those fish and I wonder if it's even the same thing. Like where I'm at in Southwest Florida on the Gulf, fish of that caliber do not exist.
No.
They are not here. And so I'm wondering, like,
we call the Gulf Coast drum. We call them baseball bat reds.
Is it the same thing? Like, will my redfish eventually be in Virginia?
Your fish don't ever come over here. At least we've never seen, the science has never showed any tagged fish to make it from the Gulf to the Atlantic coast. Maybe a little bit around that southern tip of Florida where they can bounce back and forth. But like for the most part, any fish that lives probably north of, I don't know, Sanibel or like Naples area, that fish is never coming into the Atlantic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not.
So
and not to mention just Florida fish in general, I don't think your fish migrate as much. I think the northern Atlantic, like the mid-Atlantic fish, they constantly, I think the reason they get so much bigger is they do nothing but live exactly where they want to live their entire life. Yeah. Like when it starts getting really hot in Charleston, that water starts warming up and the baits migrate north. They're like, okay, let's go up there. And they do nothing but follow bait and migrate their whole life. All a redfish does is eat. He just eats constantly. And they take so long to migrate and they follow with the currents and everything. They're not really exerting that much effort coming up here. They're just cruising and eating. And whenever you find them in the bay, all they're doing is cruising and eating. Every one of them is just gorging all day long.
So during like the course of the year, like, I don't know, I guess I'd call it like the Atlantic coast redfish. It almost makes me wonder, like, if there's that degree of separation where they just flat out never see each other, you almost begin to wonder if there's separate strains of redfish.
There's a cool study going on right now just with our fish in general. Virginia is one of the only places you see these big, like 54, 55-inch long drum. I mean, you used to occasionally see them in North Carolina. That's what that world record was. It was like a 55-inch long drum that weighed 94 pounds. And you just don't see 50s getting caught in North Carolina. I mean, the citation or the trophy requirement is proof of it. I think a trophy red drum in North Carolina is 40 inches. In Virginia, it's 47. So, I mean, that you're separated by a imaginary line that is a state border, and suddenly if your drum isn't 7 inches larger, it's not a trophy anymore. We don't care about a 40-incher up here. Like, and I'll tell you, just in my lifetime, in the last 10 years, a 50-incher doesn't even turn heads anymore. Like, nobody cares. I mean, there's so many of them. Like, people will probably hear this and they're like, this guy's crazy. That's not true. But you can look at any of the guys that fish up here. I mean, if you find a school of drum and you catch 10 out of it, 8 of them will be 50 inches. I mean, it's crazy. Like the caliber of drum we have is completely unmatched compared to anyone else.
It's world class. That's like one of those. I got to cash in on that.
The study I was referring to, I got off a little tangent there. No, they believe we have 2 separate schools of drum. We have a school that migrates south that goes and rides the Outer Banks, and that's the ones that get caught off the surf down there in Hatteras and all the Outer Banks hot spots. And then they think we have a school, predominantly those bigger 50-plus inch fish. They think they just migrate due east. They just go offshore, and they think they're out there somewhere. And they've had some isolated incidents in the wintertime where like offshore captains will be like going out to fish for like black sea bass 30, 40 miles offshore, and they'll just run into this giant massive drum laying on the bottom way offshore.
Jeez.
And they're just wondering what they don't know exactly, but there's something to the fact that you have all these gigantic 50 plus inch drum in the Chesapeake Bay, and then when October gets here and they migrate out the bay, they just disappear. You see a handful get caught in North Carolina. The fishery down there, like I do a lot of that Alvis fishing and stuff like that down in Morehead City, Harkers Island area. When you find drum there, when you find those big schools, they're all the same size. They're like 42 to 44 inches long, and there's acres of them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. That's what I was curious about. It was like, is it going to be? Are they like a very specific size range? It's like they're a brood that has always been together.
Travel together for the most part.
Now, it's not like 40s and 50s and 30s mixed in together. It's like
not typically the 30s. We call those the mystery fish in Virginia. Those like 34 to 38 inchers. You like never catch them. We don't really know where they go. It's weird. You might find them just occasionally, but it's almost like they're too big to be up on the flats rooting around with the pups anymore. And they want to cruise with the bigger fish. But like I think they're in those schools with those bigger fish, but the bigger ones just beat them to all the baits. You're throwing a bait in there and there's a 45-inch drum and a 38-inch drum. I mean, that 45-inch drum's mouth's 8 inches across. He's going to probably get it before that little one does. I don't know. Those weird like upper 30s, mid 30-inch fish, they're just kind of hard to find in Virginia. But you find a ton of pups, up in the flats, shallow, and then you find the giants. So that's like my favorite part about redfish in Virginia is we have some really, really good inshore sight casting, like to belly crawling pups, like anywhere from 16 to like 26, 27-inch fish. Every few years, you'll get this real good run of like 29 to 30-inch fish. But then you have the whole life cycle. You catch rats, pups, and then you catch super giants. It's just cool. It's cool to catch those super giants and then go later in the summer and catch like a 17-inch redfish. And you're like, you're going to be gigantic one day. Like you're holding this little creature in your hand and you're like, I catch your brothers and sisters that are 8 times your size. Like they're so much bigger than you.
Now the giant ones is their arrival into your area like predictable? Like, is it one of those things that's like,
it's pretty consistent every year. It's usually, it depends. They show up with the moon more often than not. Like water temperature plays a factor. Like if the water's warm enough, you can almost count on them. If you have like a late full moon in March, they'll show up. But it's usually the first or the full moon in April is when they really show up good. And they definitely cater to like the crabs too, because a lot of the old timey crabbers around here, like the old guys, they say that moon in May is like the biggest molt for crabs all year. That's when you have all the soft shells and stuff. So like from May till July is soft shell season, and drum aren't stupid. Yeah, they can crush a freaking rock. And I mean, they crush oysters and stuff to eat. So they don't care if it has a soft shell or not, but you're still going to eat the easier meal if you can. So
because when they come pouring into the bay or whatever area, and like, are they pretty indiscriminate in what they're just eating whatever's in their path, or are they keyed in on specific like food sources?
I'll be honest, when they first show up, they're usually in schools, like big schools. I mean, we had probably the best spring we've ever had this year, out patrolling various areas of the bay looking for them. And it's all sight fishing in the spring. You go out in like tower boats, and I mean, the first day we went out there, we caught like 30. And I mean, we pulled the boat out of the marina we were in, and the sun was up and you could see a school almost a mile away. I mean, the water was just glowing.
I was about to say, how are you seeing them? You just see their backs, or is it birds?
There's so many of them. And our water clarity up here is pretty good in the spring, believe it or not. It's as long as it's not windy, it doesn't churn those flats up too bad.
Yeah.
It literally looks like a pumpkin patch. It's this giant orange glow in the water. I mean, you can't miss it. You don't even need polarized glasses. You can see them. The funny thing is, most of the schools are about 75 to like 150 fish is like an average school. But in the spring, there are days where you see schools that, I mean, people are going to listen to this. They're going to be like, this guy is so full of crap. There are legitimately days you can't see the end of it. I mean, a mile of
I've
fish.
seen videos like that online. I mean, it's believable. Yeah. You can see the drone videos that are, I'm not sure where they're taken, but I've seen the drone videos where it's like an endless.
Blacktip H has a cool video with one of our local captains with Austin Haney of Fineo. If you search like Blacktip H giant red drum, you'll see it. Mm-hmm. They have a school that they found. This is later season, but they found a school out there. They were actually in the ocean, and they found a school off the beach. I think they were 8 or 10 miles out. They were way out looking for cobia, and they just came across a school that was legitimately like 3 miles long and like 200 yards wide. And it's just, I mean, you can see it in the video. It's just shoulder to shoulder, colossal red drum. Just hundreds of thousands of them.
I mean, so you got these massive, incredibly powerful fish that exist in these enormous schools. I know that at some point I would think the school itself becomes almost like a hazard, like you can be entangled.
Dude, there's days where you're out there casting at them. And I mean, the first day we were in a buddy of mine, Corey, we were in his Jones Brothers, and it's just a deep V bay boat with a cobia tower on it. And there was a point where we had 4 of us, all 4 of us are hooked up, and the school is surrounding the boat, and you can feel the drum thumping into the boat, trying to get away. I mean, drum are funny when they're in a school. I try to describe it to people. I'm like, when there's that many redfish in a school that big, I mean, like I said, there's some days these schools are 150 yards wide. Mm-hmm. The only fish that really know what's going on are the ones that are hooked. The rest of them are like, are we scared? Are we eating? Are we scared? Are we eating? What's going on?
Yeah. What's Joe doing?
Yeah, for like that 25-second period for when you're first hooked up, everybody's just sailing baits into the water, and all these drum are like, oh, I guess we're eating, and then they get hooked, and then it's all just pandemonium. But I mean, they're just so fun, man. I know a lot of these hardcore cobia guys are like, oh man, they're just a dumb drum. Why do you want to catch a drum? I'm like, they're big, they're stupid, and they fight really hard. I'm like, what? Like, what more do you want? You can catch them on top water. Like, we've gone out there some days where I'm not. I mean, it's once again, people are gonna listen to this and be like, this kid is so full of crap. We've gone out there before and caught so many of these stupid drum that we'll take a popper and take the hooks off just to bomb it into the school and watch 75 fish try to eat it on the way in. I mean, blowing up on it. You see just this 5-gallon bucket mouth just eat a 10-inch popper, and it's like, I mean, it's just one of the most violent things you've ever seen. And you pull it out of his mouth, and then there's another one and another one, and I mean, they just don't care.
And you're doing the same thing with fly gear as well, right? I've seen the photos of you fly fishing for them.
Oh yeah. I mean, dude, when you hook me, I mean, you could throw a beer can into those schools and they're gonna bite it. Like, it's so stupid. I mean, I'll be the first to say catching those giant drum in Virginia on a fly it's an accomplishment because it's a huge fish, but it's not hard. It's just you got to get out there and get to where they are, and then you plop a fly in there, 1-2 strips, and it's like thud. There he is. Like, okay, this is gonna take 15 minutes, and you just set the hook and hang on. The only way they typically break you off is if they run back into the school. I mean, you're out in the middle of the bay. There's nothing to break off on. You just hang on. Now, I mean, it's nothing fancy.
When they leave, I mean, are they heading north or are they heading south? And are they just gone like that? Is it just like all of a sudden it's over?
There's some years where it's like a light switch, and then other years it's more of like a slow burn of them leaving. But the fall fishery is really cool because they come in. They they go all the way to the top of the Chesapeake. They catch drum in the mouth of the Susquehanna, like way up the bay. Yeah. And they catch them way up the Potomac. They catch them all the way up into Maryland and almost into freaking Pennsylvania. Like, it's crazy how far they go. But then they all start migrating out after that, like, first good cold snap in like late September, mid-September, and they start flooding the lower bay. They start piling up on structure. So like wrecks, bridges, the really cool fishery that, I mean, you've probably seen hundreds of pictures from me. We catch them in the kayaks at the Bay Bridge Tunnel.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome.
17-mile tunnel that goes across the whole Chesapeake Bay to the eastern shore. And I mean, you're hooking
a freaking kayak.
You're hooking a 70-pound redfish vertical next to a bridge, and all he wants to do is break you off. That's all he wants to do.
How are y'all landing those? That's what I always wondered in your pictures. Where like at some point you get that damn thing in your lap. I'm like,
yeah.
Is there like an art to it without tipping? I'd be scared to fall over.
All the credit in the world goes to a buddy of ours, like a local guy. He's the definition of like the OG kayak fisherman, Kevin Whitley. He's a dude you should really consider getting on. That like he's an awesome dude. He goes by his Instagram's like Kayak Kevin. He's actually
Josh has told me about him. Yeah, I seen him on the website too.
The dude's unbelievable. He's been kayak fishing since like putting rod holders on a kayak was like the dumbest thing you could ever do. He developed this kind of like technique for landing them he calls like the leg sweep. So when you're in these big kayaks, like kayaks nowadays, modern day kayaks are pretty stable and they're a little bit wider than they used to be, but still, you know, it's like a 60+ pound fish and you're trying to horse them into the kayak. Drum, luckily, they have a really big pronounced like gill plate that it looks in pictures like you're just in there grabbing their gills, but you're not.
Yeah.
They have this big bone. It actually feels just like the bone right beside, like it feels like your jawbone.
Yeah.
You reach in there, we all call it the drum handle. When you get them beside the boat, you just reach in there, you lock your hand into that jawbone and you stick your leg in the water, just sweep them in with your leg. And they honestly, once you get their head up, you just kind of plop, they just plop right into the kayak. And it's a drum.
I just envision this Kevin guy with like one giant quad.
He's got videos of him with like, he's got videos of him like tripled up with them with like two giants in the kayak, and he's like landing another one. Like it's just pandemonium. And the way he developed, like way he learned how to do it was nuts. Like he'll tell you to this day, he'll never do it the way he used to. They used to anchor up in the shoals, like 7 to 10 foot breakers are like 20 feet off the kayak, and they're throwing baits in there, and then they're hooking drum that are trying to pull you into the breakers.
Oh gosh,
no one does that anymore. Absolutely no one. But yeah, I mean the Bay Bridge Tunnel in the fall that is when almost everyone catches them in a kayak because it's really accessible. You can catch them fairly close to shore. I don't know. I mean, it's still, I think, technically speaking, it's one of the hardest fish on planet Earth to land in a kayak. You're hooking a gigantic fish that's powerful as crap. You're hooking it. They're glued to the pilings. You're hooking.
I'm about to say, especially around the pilings, like you're at the mercy of what that fish wants to do, at least for the first 30 seconds of the fight.
Yeah, the second you hook him, the first 30 seconds is everything, because he's either going to be a dumb one and swim right out into the bay. Like once in a while, you'll hook one and he'll just leave the bridge and just go out into La La Land, and you're like, oh, cool. You catch 90% of those. The next thing he's going to do is you hook him and he goes right through the pilings, and you're like, okay, that's where the kayakers have the huge advantage because we can chase them
right through. Yeah,
that's tough because I mean, this is even more credit to Kevin. When you feel that braid touch the piling, the first thing you do is put the reel into free spool. Just free spool. Whatever happens, happens.
That's what I was interested in. It's like, I would think that you'd want to put, I don't know, like a 30-yard shock leader on there. Of like
I run a longer leader. I run a longer leader than most people. I run 2 rod lengths, so usually about 15 feet, maybe 14 and a half, give or take. And I run a leader of like 80 usually, and that gives you a little bit of leeway. They'll still break it like it's dental floss on those pilings, but it at least gives you that extra half to 3/4 of a second to be like, oh crap, like flip the reel into free spool. And Kevin explains it perfectly. If you fight that fish around the piling, he's going to break you off 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But if you put it into free spool and chase him through, at least your odds are like 50-50. You know, you chase him through, get him free of the piling, and then reel up your slack. And drum are not good at throwing a hook, period. I mean, they just, once you drill them with a jig or you hit them with a circle hook with a live bait, they're not throwing it.
Well, they got like thick mouths. It's like real going to get buried in there.
Yeah, like big, thick, like grandpa, just nasty old man hips, like just huge, meaty face. You get a barb in their face, it's just so much meat there. They're terrible at throwing it, and they don't roll. Drum do not roll.
Right.
So as long as you're over top of them, they can't get the hook out of their head unless they break you off. So the ones that I free spool, I would say your odds are better than 50-50, honestly. But you chase them through, you re-engage, and I've had a fish. Luckily, I landed it. The wildest one out ever was I hooked it. It went through the pilings, free spool, go through, re-engage, and then my line's back through the pilings the other way. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So then I'm like pedaling my kayak back through the pilings, re-engaged. I'm like, where is this fish? And he had already gone through the next set of pilings. I went through 4 sets of pilings with this fish, and I catch it. And it's like a 42 incher. It's like one of the smallest ones you could catch. I'm like, this is so stupid.
Oh,
But
jeez.
those are the athletes, though. Those like 42 to 46 inchers, it's almost like they still have a little bit of pup left in them. They're super athletic, crazy strong, blistering fast runs. But then you hook like a 50 or like a 52 or a 53, you can almost say how big your fish is the second you hook it. Like you hook it, they stay down, and it's just these big, just bone crushing head shakes. And you're like, this is a giant. But like a lot of times those giants, in my opinion, are easier to land. It's harder to get them up and they're stronger, but like it's not that crazy athletic, like
Yeah.
you don't feel like you're going to lose that giant like you do the small one, where you're like, this 42 to 44 incher could just do whatever he wants with me. There's so much more fast and agile. I don't know.
Well, it's like such an incredible. I guess this is mostly like a fall fishery, mostly a fall.
The bridge fisheries in the fall, they don't seem to like post up on structure in the spring like they do in the fall. In spring, they're more worried about hanging out, cruising together. And then in the fall, they're still in schools, but they're a little more solitary. Like you'll catch one off a piling and there might be a couple more down there with him. Or like if you catch one off of this piling, chances are in the next 2 or 3 pilings, you're probably going to hook another one. Like they're still sort of close together, but they disperse a lot more in the fall. They gather back up offshore when they're migrating, but when they get on structure, they kind of just like eat and cruise around.
So where are the cobia at in all of this? Because like kind of intermittent between your giant redfish photos, like you also catch these world-class cobia. Like is this are they in the same area? I mean,
there's plenty of times you'll find cobia in schools of drum. I mean, cobia have a whole different like migration pattern. They show up about a month after the drum do. Their magic number is like 65 degrees. Water's got to be above 65 for them to come up top. That's typically the only way I fish for them, sight fish for them. If it's not above 65, they won't usually come up to the surface for who knows what reason. A lot of guys catch them chumming and stuff like that. That just doesn't really interest me that much. I like the engagement of throwing a jig at the fish and watching him chase it and, making it. That's just, I don't know, it's more fun. And then catching them on a fly too. But they come up, and cobia, when they first come up, all they're worried about spawning. So you have these like pairs and triples. Sometimes you'll have these super packs that'll have like a giant female with like 20 little males with her. And the early season fish can be a little tougher, but they've got other things on their mind. And, those early season fish are just, it's fun because they usually attack a jig after you have this weird, like couple week period where a lot of them are spawning and they get tough to catch. But after the spawn, the cobia go and they start relating to structure more. And structure can be anything. It can be a buoy. It can be a bridge. It could be a sea turtle. It could be a big mat of cow-nose rays. Like the later season, I think cobia get easier because you find them on everything. Like I'm not saying they'll be on every buoy, but that's when the buoy fishing gets good. That's when the bridge gets good. That's when all those kind of things get better. But they just have their own whole totally different pattern. I mean, they're a blast. I love catching them. I mean, if you had gun to my head, if I had to pick, I'd rather catch drum. But the cobia, I mean, you can eat them. They're really good to eat. They're my favorite fish to eat.
Yeah.
But I try not to kill too many. I mean, our fishery for the cobia, just like the stripers, it's declined pretty heavily with the commercial fishery for the bunker and stuff. But it's still one of the best cobia fisheries in the world. I mean, it's still unbelievable. Like people who come up here have never experienced, are like, oh, this is the greatest place on earth. And I hate to be one of those guys, but like back in my day, 10 years ago.
All right.
But I mean, legitimately 10 years, they have a study that shows the average size of cobia in the Chesapeake Bay in the last 10 years has dropped almost 12 inches, almost an entire foot. So they're a lot. I mean, it's easy to see. 15 years ago, you could fish all day cobia fishing and maybe see 10 boats with a tower. You can't drive to the ramp without seeing 10 boats on the interstate with a tower anymore. I mean, everybody's got one. I mean, there's days you see 200 boats with towers running around. Granted, you can see all the way across the bay most days if it's clear, so it's not hard to see that many boats. But it's once cobia get here, you cannot look in any direction of the Chesapeake Bay and not see a boat with a tower. It's impossible.
Yeah, it's I've never caught a cobia. My brother's caught one right next to me when we were surf fishing one time, and I've caught
never caught one off the surf. They do it a lot in the Outer Banks, and they actually do it a lot in Charleston. I see a lot of guys catching them in Charleston in the surf.
We were in the panhandle of Florida when he did that. Okay. That was interesting. But it's definitely one of those unique fish that, like, you know what I like is the videos where the guys will go out and find manta rays and catch them off manta rays. I'm like, what a crazy way to catch a fish.
That's the cool thing about the bay, man. I've caught them off a manta ray up here. I mean, we had a random day where
I was unbelievable.
A good buddy of mine, Jason, he's a commercial guy, and I've just met him when I used to work at Bass Pro, and he was one of my regulars, and just invited me out there one day, and I guess he was like, hey, this guy's pretty okay at what he does, so I'll let him keep fishing with me. And I've had some amazing days on the bay with him. Like, just we had one day where he called me up. He's like, hey, you're gonna want to get up here and see this, and climb up the tower, and it's just 15-foot wide manta ray, and there's like 30 cobia on its back. Other days we have those spotted eagle rays up here.
Yeah, we have those here too.
See those a lot more than manta ray was odd. I've only ever seen one of those, but the spotted eagle ray, we see those. I mean, if you fish as much as he does, you might see it like 5 times a season. The nice thing about an eagle ray is they don't spook. Manta rays will spook.
Yeah.
Eagle rays don't care. You can hit them with a boat. Like, they are so stupid. Yeah. They will just fly around in the bay, and they go so slow. They're not as big as a manta ray, but something about them and the cobia just like them. I mean, I've seen one where there was a time when the eagle ray turned and you couldn't see him. There were so many cobia on his back. Jeez. Like, I mean, talking 30 or 40 cobia crawling all over this thing.
Their habit of following stuff so interesting to me. I was just listening to a different podcast. It was actually from a guy he was a spear fisherman, and he was talking about spearing cobia off of tiger sharks. He's like, would not recommend it.
That just doesn't sound like a good idea in any way.
Yeah, he's like, it's not a smart thing. But we were spearfishing. I was like, well, what a crazy what dynamic.
Oops, I missed the cobia.
Are they benefiting the other fish somehow? Like, you would think that there's some kind of, I forget the term where like the two fish kind of benefit off of each other, but it's like, I mean, why a tiger shark?
I've seen them school with like everything. I mean, you name it. You see a sea turtle, they'll have 5 of them with them. You see drum, they'll be swimming with the drum. Granted, if they're with the drum, good luck. You'll never get a bait to them. The drum will beat the cobia to it 100 out of 100 times. You'll see like a pallet floating in the bay, and there's like 5 cobia swimming under it in a circle. They're just like, what's that thing? I mean, I just think they're stupid. Like, I don't know. I mean, they're a weird fish, but they're cool. I mean, it's one of those things. It's probably it's one of the big 3 in the bay. You got cobia, drum, and then stripers. Like, that's what the Chesapeake Bay is known for. Stripers used to be number 1, but like I said, I think our new poster child is just those drum. You're crazy if you don't think it is, because they don't get any bigger anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, I love the idea of catching giant striper, but like, I'll never forget my biggest redfish was 42 inches. And I caught it on a tiny little piece of calamari. I was trying to catch bait. I caught 2 that day, back to back. A school bus had come through, and I was astonished at how hard this thing fought. Granted, I was like a high school kid, so I had never felt anything like that. And I thought that thing was enormous. So when I see y'all's photos, it's like, geez, this is like unbelievable. I mean, like, you're sitting on a gold mine.
That's not like an isolated story either. Like, we used to fish this big tournament down at Virginia Beach, the Tidewater Kayak Anglers like charity tournament. We don't fish it as much anymore. It's been a few years since I've fished it. But the first year I ever fished it, it has a slam division, which is drum, trout, flounder, and I think they changed it to drum, trout, striper now for like a schoolie striper. Then they have a striper division, trout division, flounder division, and a drum division. And the guy who won the drum division was fishing just a top and bottom rig, just a metal bottom rig, the one you buy at Walmart for 40 cents. And two little snelled eagle claw hooks with a piece of fish bites on there. And he caught a 46-inch drum, and he won the drum division. Like that's the fish that won.
Yeah.
And he was like, I was just out here fishing for croaker. Like
Fish bites. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. Little piece of bloodworm fish bites, and that drum smoked it.
Yeah.
Like, whatever.
Oh, geez. Well, I could talk about the drum for like an entire episode, but
Yeah.
I don't want to sell your fishery short. So we'll just move inland.
We'll move in a little bit.
Because I don't know, man. I've got my personal preferences on like the kind of environments that I like to fish, but y'all's like tidal marsh scene, like the environment y'all have in those tide affected marshes is so fantastic. Like it's some of the coolest stuff I've done is coming up there and fishing with y'all. The wildlife is pristine. You feel like you're in a whole other country. I mean, it's just and on top of just the fishing, it's just the ambient like scenery around you with the bald eagles and some of the cliffs, and then knowing like the historical relevance of like where you're at and how unchanged it is. But just tell me about
legitimately like how we're fishing places like where this country was founded and like where some of the first places this country was ever explored and settled, and it hasn't changed any. I mean, you're still fishing marsh that's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. Hell, it's been there for hundreds of thousands of years. Mm-hmm. But you're looking at the same marsh that John Smith looked at when he was settling Jamestown, like when he left Jamestown to explore the Chesapeake Bay and map it out. Any one of these rivers you fish, you're looking at the same stuff he was seeing. I mean, it's crazy to think about.
Well, I definitely value it more as a Florida guy because it's so hard to find undeveloped water here. I mean, it's just, I mean, it's like every month there's new developments popping up. They're changing, the way the water is. So it's like, man, I come up there and look at y'all's waterways. I was like, this is so fantastic. This is what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah, we have the benefit of a lot of our waterways are so large and they have so much flow. I don't think you could ever like redirect them or change anything to like really alter the waterway that much.
Yeah.
You got people building houses everywhere, but a lot of our waterways, like you said, the marshes, once you get to a certain area to the east, Virginia has that eastern region that they call the Tidewater. That includes the ocean side, but it's like the farthest eastern region of all of our rivers turns into that salt marsh, brackish marsh area. And the benefit is where the water's edge meets the marsh, there's places on these rivers where you might have 3/4 of a mile of swampy marsh that you can't develop on. You can't do anything with that. So then you get to the actual land itself. And yes, somebody might build a house there, but it's not going to actually alter the river in any way. The marsh and all that filtration that is so vital for the way this Chesapeake Bay watershed functions, it's really hard for them to actually alter it. Like, I mean, unless there are some people, there's one dock I can think of, and it's the only one I've ever seen. But this person has a house, and I swear they have a dock going all the way out to the river that's almost a mile long. I don't have any idea who they contracted to build that, but that dude probably saw his next 2 years paycheck when they were like, yeah, we want to dock all the way out to the river. He's like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
But I mean, most of these people don't have a way to really get to the river when they're down there.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, and we use the word like marsh or I wouldn't maybe you could call it a swamp. Marsh.
It's more marsh than swamp. I mean,
it's definitely more.
I don't really consider anything a swamp unless you have just to me, it's like when I think swamp, I think cypress.
Stagnant. Well, yeah, that too. Or water that's not moving a lot. Y'all's system is always in a constant state of ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
But what really took me back was just how much life is in the waters. Everywhere we went from
it's crazy because snakeheads are eating everything. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, we're gonna get into the snakehead thing because I think that's the most unique wrinkle to this whole natural ecosystem thing. We talk about how
out of the whole river, I can say with almost 100% positive, 100% positive, the most diverse and just nutrient rich, just life rich area of the river is those marshes. I mean, you pull up in these creeks and there's shad jumping out of the way. There's perfect example, Father's Day yesterday. My dad and I guess it gives away when this was recorded.
No big deal.
But yeah, we went out on Father's Day, and just running into one creek, we saw 15 bald eagles before we came off plane. We only ran 6 miles and saw 15 bald eagles, different birds, cross in front of us and pass us. I mean, they're that amount of life. And a biologist buddy of mine told me, if you want to know how healthy a river or a marsh or any sort of waterway is, if you have that many raptors, that many birds of prey, that is the instant sign that it's healthy, because they're the easiest one. They can leave. They can just go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like they're the first ones to leave if it sucks. And you have hundreds and hundreds. This one particular area of one of these rivers, it's about a 22-mile section of river. They said there's over 500 nesting pairs of bald eagles in 22 miles.
Jeez.
I mean, that's unbelievable. There's nowhere else in the world like that except maybe like Alaska, where they're like seagulls. But
yeah,
I mean, it's just unbelievable. I know growing up, when my dad and I used to do a lot of catfishing on the James, we would stop the boat and take a picture of a bald eagle. Like, that's how uncommon they were. Now it's like you pull up to the ramp and there's 3 in the trees at the ramp, just chill there looking at you. I mean, it's a great success story, but in terms of the life in the rivers, like you were saying, the amount of diversity. I mean, you're sitting there trolling down a pad line and it's like, oh, there's a bass, there's a yellow perch, there's a white perch, there's 10 billion shad. Oh, look, there's 50 gar spawning. Like, it's really some of my favorite stuff in the world.
Yeah, that's what's so incredible to me being there. Is like food seemed like such an abundant resource. Like, I recall the first year I came up there was in a kayak at one point. There were so many of those killifish. I mean, it looked like they were raining. And they were literally like, at each stroke of the paddle, I'd look back and they'd be in the bottom of the kayak. I was like, there is, and like as the frogs coming across the surface of the water, they're showering through the air. Yeah. I'm like, is anything going to eat my lure? Because like food is such a massive, like there's so much
I laughed the other day. I saw a dude trying to explain like how he targets snakehead and bowfin. He's like, I look for these schools of killifish and I target them. I'm like, so you just cast everywhere? I'm
they're all over the place.
Everywhere. I'm like, I can't make 2 casts without just spraying a shower of killifish when my bait hits the water. Like, it's the most like biologically healthy area that I've ever fished. I mean, the last 10 years that I've been fishing down there really, really hard. It's hard for me to like travel a lot of places because I enjoy it so much. And it's just nice to see a healthy ecosystem while you're fishing.
Yeah. Well, it's become kind of a common theme at this point in this podcast with snakehead talk. You know, I've had a few snakehead guys come on, but it's like that myth got busted so hard for me when I came up there and fished it the first time, like what snakeheads are really all about, because I couldn't believe while looking for these things that, you know, that get pitched as this bloodthirsty monster from hell. There's gar everywhere. We're catching more bass than we're catching snakeheads. There's catfish, which is almost too many catfish.
No, that's not all.
Fish are everywhere. Bowfin left and right.
Way too many catfish.
Yeah,
that's
but I'm just
totally different story.
There is absolutely a boundary that those snakeheads won't be able to get past, whether it be other species that it's not even competition. There's a shared resource there in food that's insurmountable.
There's shock boat studies. You know, we have the boats that go around and shock and do sampling. The fish shock boat studies show that their main food source, and I mean, I eat snakeheads occasionally. The northern snakeheads are phenomenal to eat, but I don't know. I like catching them too much. I don't like killing them. But once in a while, you'll get one that gets gut hooked, and you know, why feed the turtles? They get enough food as it is. I'll bring him home. But it is what it is. But anyway, you check their stomachs. Other than right before the spawn when they're hardly eating, their stomachs are just bulging, full. And you cut it and it's 999 killifish in their stomach. Like every stomach you cut open is just nothing but killifish. And I mean, I've found some cool stuff. Like I've found a chipmunk.
That's crazy.
A buddy of mine found a squirrel. That was kind of cool. Snakes, lizards, a lot of frogs. But the main thing you find is killifish and little shad. And the number one myth or the number one thing, you've heard it from everybody, What are they eating? What are the snakes eating all of? You know,
They're
they're
eating up
eating
all the bass.
all the bass. They're all getting eaten. I have never found a bass. I found sunfish. I've found the worst thing I ever found was a warmouth, which is just a really cool native little sunfish. I mean, I think y'all have them down there.
Yeah,
But
we do. Yeah.
yeah, they're just a cool little native sunfish that sadly, as cool as they are and as badass as they are, they get outcompeted by like every other sunfish. So it kind of sucked to see a snakehead eat one of those, but like is what it is. But the number one fish everyone's worried about is a bass, and I've never found one in a snakehead stomach.
Have you found the opposite? Have you observed the bass to be eating the snakeheads? Because that's what I've heard. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, especially the fry. When the snakehead are guarding their fry, I have seen 2 snakeheads over 10 pounds guarding a school of fry, and there were like 20 bass just taking turns. Looked like
yeah, just no chance.
Tuna just blitzing through there, and the snakeheads are just sitting there like, what are we supposed to do?
Nope.
And by the time I fished that school and left, came back out the creek like an hour and a half later, I found the 2 parents, and there was like the school was like the size of a hula hoop. And when I came back, the bass had left, and it was like the size of a mason jar was all that was left. The bass had just decimated it. And I mean, it's the shock boat studies show these fish have been here for 20 years, and you name a species: bass, perch, ring perch or white perch, crappie, catfish, which are the real problem. But any of these main big sport fish that everyone likes to fish for, the numbers are better than they've ever been. The catch rate per hour is higher than ever. The average size of these fish that they're catching is higher than ever. I mean, it's crazy. No one's saying that's because of the snakeheads. No one's saying that.
Yeah.
But they're saying, like, if they're causing so much harm, why is this happening? You know, this doesn't make any sense. Even their number one food source, the killifish, the numbers are higher than ever. It's right. Like, what is the problem? What are they doing?
I could not believe how many of those killifish there were. It was astonishing how many of them was in the water.
Like trillions is probably an accurate estimate. Like, it's unbelievable.
Oh, per like a square, like small region, there'd be that many. You know, I think of like snakeheads, I don't want to say competing, but like sharing an area, I'd be less concerned about like a largemouth bass, which is like there's a period of overlap there where I think the bass are spending some time, but like they're moving off in a deeper water.
And like, truthfully, they fill a niche that like another fish doesn't fill. I mean, in our ecosystem, people think of the only fish that they probably spend the most time nearby is a bowfin.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
Truthfully, they don't spend as much time near the bowfin as you think. Cause like, I don't typically find bowfin up in like snakeheads, like soft cover more than anything. Mm-hmm. They will hang out on a tree or a log or something, but it's usually a tree or a log that's in a pad field or a grass, like a grass mat or something. They prefer soft cover, where I find bowfin prefer the exact opposite. They like hard cover. They like a tree. They like
stumps and stuff.
Stump. Yeah. They like anything hard, or they like laying on a mud bottom. And that's one thing you'll never see a snakehead do is laying on the bottom. They're always slow cruising, or if you do see them laying, they're like laid on top of a grass bed. But they don't spend as much time side by side as you would think. And I mean, I'll be the first to say, you put a bowfin and a snakehead, they're the same size together. That bowfin's whipping his ass 10 times out of 10. Like, snakeheads look mean and scary, but you've witnessed it. They spook at like, you drop a pin in the boat and they'll spook. I mean, they are, for being this bloodthirsty, pet eating monster that everyone tried to like bring them out to be. I think it's just bred into them. They grow up their whole life knowing they are a food item. And even when they get big, the only real predator they still have is birds. And I mean, I've seen a lot of birds take them out, a lot of ospreys work them. But like, bowfin, I always tell people they almost act like a great white. We see these juvenile great whites when we're cobia fishing in like late fall or late summer off the beach a lot of times, little like 8 to 9 foot great whites. I mean, it's not a little one, but you know what I mean, small considering how big they get. You can pull a 25-foot boat up right beside that great white, and he doesn't care. It's like their genetics. They're just like, I'm top of the food chain. Nothing's gonna eat me. They just kind of cruise around and look at the boat. Bowfin do the same thing. You almost have to like hit them to spook them. I mean,
Yeah.
they'll sit there and like tense up and look at you, but I don't think anything eats bowfin in their entire life. Where
Yeah, no.
snakeheads constantly get eaten. So the two fish, like I said, they share habitat, but they really don't interact with each other as much as you'd think. And the bass, especially when it gets hot, bass aren't laying up in a foot of water where it's 90 degrees. They're out off the bank somewhere.
That's what I thought. I was like, the only other thing I can think that maybe there's some like them being near each other is the bowfin. I was very curious, like your observations, because I don't get to see that. There's a few areas down here with our bullseyes where you'll see bullseyes and bowfin together. Yeah. But even then, like our bullseyes are in such like urban settings, the bowfin just are not there.
Yeah, and typically one thing I've noticed is if you go to like a creek or an area that gets a lot of pressure, bowfin will be the farthest away from the pressure. I've noticed bowfin to migrate away from pressure, and people like, oh, I used to catch a bunch of bowfin in here. I'm like, yeah, but you've been in here how many times this year? Like, I've noticed almost 100% of the time, if I catch a bowfin, he will be in one of the farthest and hardest to reach areas of some of these creeks where there are places you can catch a snakehead while you're putting the boat in. And then your whole way back, you can catch them. And you'll keep catching snakeheads as you go further back. But the numbers of bowfins seem to increase the further away from the pressure you get.
Yeah.
And I think it's just them being intelligent. They're like, I don't like all this annoyance. I'm going where people can't get to me. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So like with the snakeheads, do you have like a preferred period for chasing them, or is it pretty much just once it gets warm, we're chasing them?
I mean, it goes back to our multi-species thing. We have guys that are just hardcore snakehead guys. It's all they want to fish for. And I mean, I love them. I spend as much time on them as just about anybody, but we have so much stuff going on when it really starts warming up. Like in April, we have the shad run, and it sounds silly, but I grew up doing it. And I love catching shad. It's so much fun. Just go out there and whack on them with a fly rod. And then that comes with the stripers, and then that comes with the catfish and the flatheads, which we're going to talk about at some point. Then after that, it bleeds right into the drum. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go drum fishing. Like if I can between the two, I'm like, do I want to go snakehead fishing, which is going to be good all summer? Like once May gets here, yeah, the fishing changes. Like you catch them different ways, and the habitat changes as the grass grows, and the fish start doing different stuff. But like from May until mid-October, you can snakehead fish whenever you want. Like they're game time. But I would say like my favorite period is pretty much late May through June into like the first week of July, like that kind of 6-week period. And I have a lot of fun catching them late August because there's like a specific way I like to catch them, and it's really, really good in late August. But from that, like after July until like late August, they kind of become a sort of like a fallback. Like if I can't go red fishing, or if I can't go smallmouth fishing or something, I'm like, the snakeheads are always there and they're eager to please. So it's nice to have them for that.
Do you have
I think early summer.
What I like that you're doing, a lot of times when you talk about snakeheads, like it immediately becomes like a frog fishing topic, but like you're doing more than just throwing frogs. I mean, the frog is fun because the blow up is really all the excitement, but you're throwing flies at them too. Are you throwing like a top water fly?
I throw a lot of like frog, not necessarily frog flies. Some of the ones that I tie look like frogs, but they're more like a suggestive thing. It's not that it looks like a frog or it looks like a bait fish. It's just a thing that's waking across the surface that's like, it's just ingrained in snakeheads' DNA. You look at them, they have this huge underbite. The eyes are on top of their head. They're designed to eat on top.
Yeah.
So you throw something that wakes and darts around on the surface, they're going to come up and eat it. I mean, they're just like, I don't know what it is, but it's trying to get away. So smoke it.
Now, are you mostly sight casting at them, or is it the same thing where you're like doing all this fly casting and like search casting?
during the fry ball season, that's the easiest time to get one on a fly because you're like, well,
Yeah.
there they are. There's at least 2 fish right there with those fries. So, yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of sight fishing. But when the tide gets really low in late summer, you get real clear water because the grass is so thick. And you can strictly sight fish them then, just like drift around and wait till you see one cruising a grass line or laid up on the bank. And yeah, I mean, it's a blast to sight fish them, but I do a lot of blind casting too. Got some flies that got some that, I can two-hand strip really fast and cover water quick. And then I've got some subsurface ones. I actually just happen to have one laying here that's been munched on. But like these game changer flies. But you throw those and I fish them very fast right under the surface and they're waking and darting around and just looks like a bait fish. But yeah, I mean, some days I get that fly itch and I'm just like, all right, I'm only throwing fly and you can cover water. There are days, especially late summer, when the water gets real hot, those fish get a little. Snakeheads are probably the last fish to get a little finicky when the water gets hot. They actually like it, but they still get a little sluggish. And I swear you can outfish gear on fly some days in August. When they're in a mood, you can really put a hurting on them with the fly rod.
Well, you have these like 2 shallow water, swampy, cylindrical body fish with long dorsal fins in the bowfin and the snakehead that are predatory.
Yeah.
Like you do a lot of fly fishing for the bowfin as well. Is there like a similarity is it the same game with the snakeheads as it is with the bowfin, or is it 2 totally different things?
It's very different. Like
that's very interesting.
You will occasionally, when you're snakehead fishing, you'll get like a fired up bowfin to eat, but it's typically only the fired up ones. Unless, I mean, now granted, these bait fish flies, I mean, if I see a bowfin laying in the mud, I can throw it, let it fall right down on his nose and twitch it. He's probably going to bite it.
Yeah.
But like the way I typically bowfin fish, we have a really cool sight fishing game for bowfin because we have the tidal water that clears up. So a lot of these guys that fish for them up north in the lakes, they're in the swampy, super algae infested water. They're doing what's called dapping, where they have 8 or 10 foot of line out and they just kind of drop the fly right on his head, hook him. I do some of that, but we have a pretty rare style of fishing here where we can sight fish them almost like you're red fishing. I mean, I'll be poling the boat and 30, 40 feet, 50 feet, sometimes as much as 100 feet in front of the boat. If you have a nice, clear, silty mud flat, you can see them laying there.
Yeah.
And you can approach them just like you would a redfish. And we throw, this legitimately was not planned. These are flies that have been sitting here for years. But we'll throw just like crawfish flies at them.
Yeah.
Throw these big flies. I mean, they love a crawfish.
Right.
And you see these bowfin laid up. You throw a crawfish to them, and typical telltale sign, that dorsal fin will start wiggling, and they like kind of come over there.
That's that oh shit moment. Like, oh.
Well, like I'll tell them, like
the
if
fuse
it's me,
has been lit.
I'm sitting here like shaking, but like if I have a buddy or somebody on the front of the boat, I'm like, all right, like get ready, he's gonna eat it. How do you know he's gonna eat it? Then you just see like this puff of mud where he just like drills it into the bottom. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
I love it. But I mean, hell, I throw like redfish flies at bowfin a lot, like these little like crab flies and stuff. They don't care. If you throw something that looks like a food item, they just kind of like, oh, that looks good. Thump.
The excitement, the excitement of them is probably more just like finding them, I guess. At least that's what it's always been for me. Is like, I don't know. It's just a lot of times, you're gonna be able to draw the bite usually, but it's like, I don't know, that searching for them can be a lot of fun.
For me, like the big difference between them, snakehead is 100% about the bite, because truthfully, northern snakeheads they don't fight that impressively. Like, it's about that wake and that smash on top water, or like if you have one of those where he comes up to it, and he's like swimming around it in a circle, looking at it, you like twitch, and he comes up to it, looks at it again. I mean, I almost like feeding them and making them eat more than that just like heat-seeking missile explosion. Those bites are cool, but I like making them eat. And that's the cool part about the snakes. And then you drill a snakehead when you hit him, and you have that 10 seconds of just utter pandemonium. They're thrashing on top, throwing water. They might do like a backflip or two, going crazy. but then it's over. You know, a lot of times you end up just kind of cranking them to the rod tip and okay. The bowfin, though, the bite a lot of times isn't that impressive. They just kind of swim over there and just like nom, and you drill them, and then it just all hell breaks loose until you put that fish back in the water. Like,
right.
even when you get them in the boat, they don't stop. They just like they're one of the worst fish to take a photo of.
Oh
like,
God, I know.
So hard.
I have so many levotation photos with them.
Oh yeah, where you're like,
yeah,
weirdest face ever because they freak out.
But the snakeheads are such a photogenic fish. Like I mean, they're such an incredible looking fish. Like the photos are just like incredible.
They have really. They have this, like, they all have a very similar habit of, you know, you'll have that pandemonium when you hook them, then you kind of crank them to the rod tip, get them in the net, everything's good. The second you get them in the net, they go freaking crazy again. They're like, oh, I don't like this. I don't I'm claustrophobic. I don't like this shit. And then you get them out of the net, and I prefer to use boga grips. It's not the best thing for the camera. I'll get on my soapbox real quick. If anyone's listening and you want to target these fish, please, just for the sake of yourself and for the sake of the fish, please. They don't have to be bogas. I know bogas are expensive, but get some sort of boga style gripper that swivels. Don't go to Walmart and buy the $14 plastic Rapala fish grips. They suck. They don't rotate. These fish go berserk, and like you haven't seen it until you've experienced it. You've seen it, you know. Those boga style grips have the thin metal jaws, and these fish, I've never fished for a fish that does not want to open its mouth like a snakehead does. Yeah, it's like you get them in the boat, they have a frog or whatever lure you use to catch them actively stabbing them in the mouth, and they're still like, no, I don't want to give it back. Like, I don't want to get it's mine. So you kind of get them under the chin, and those boga style grippers, the reason those plastic ones from Walmart don't work, they're so thick you can't get them in their mouth. And then, not to mention, if you do magically manage to get them in their mouth, when they go to spin, you're gonna break their jaw, because they're just not gonna survive. Like the grips aren't gonna swivel fast enough, and it's just inevitable. You put them on those bogas, and I have so many photos of me gripping them with the bogas and like popping the hook out. And whenever they freak out, they're not coming off the boga. There's no way.
Yeah.
You can just hold them away from your body, and they just go nuts. And you're like, okay. And then they calm down, and you're like, all right. Once they do that one freak out on the bogas, they're done. You can get your nice, crazy, pretty picture with them, and everything's good. And then you drop it right back in the water, and all hunky dory. But like, that's what I'm getting at. If you are going to fish for these fish, just do yourself and the fish a favor. I mean, I know they're invasive. If you want to kill them, whatever, it's still going to be better for you in the long run. Just get a pair of boga style grippers that rotates, and your life's going to be made 1,000 times easier. And if you're like me and you like releasing them, you're not going to kill the fish. Well, I've caught thousands of them that have broken jaws. It's just sad. They still want to eat. They still survive, but there's no reason to mutilate a fish like that.
Yeah.
Just get some swiveling bogas.
We'll jump off the snakehead thing here in a little bit, but just to hit a couple, other little points, because it's one of those fish that I feel like there's this massive growing culture of people who enjoy them.
It's really good to see, because truthfully, the kill 'em all crowd is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, or they're either getting smaller or they're getting drowned out more every year. Like, it's nice to see, because I mean, I'm guilty of it. There's some nights I get home from work and I just like will sit down and pour myself a drink, and I'm just like, I got all night, and I love going at it. On
it's wartime.
I'm just I smell blood in the water. I'm just like, I'm going after
Pick up your keyboard.
Oh, I'm terrible about it. I need to work on it. But like, it's nice to see, like, somebody will post a picture and you'll see the dude kill it, and there's already like 38 comments.
Some guy from Connecticut.
Yeah. Or like, no, the worst is when they're like from Minnesota.
They're like from nowhere near where they're at.
2,500 miles
Yeah,
from like
every
the closest
time.
place to the snakehead. You're fine. But yeah, but it's nice to see those already like 38 comments championing it. It's like they don't need me. I'll just go to like another post.
Are you required to kill them or not?
No, you are not.
Like, can you get? Is there any legal potential that somebody might knock on your door and you're going to get a fine because you were observed to release one back in the water?
Absolutely not. The law, and it's always been the same law in every state. Anybody who wants to debate this, come at me. It's been the same. It's even been the same in Florida. Everyone's like, you gotta kill them. The law says it's legal. I'm calling the cops. And it's like, okay, call them, Karen. Like, I don't care. The law says it is illegal to release snakeheads. That does not mean one that you caught. That means I bought this snakehead from rarefishtrade.com. It got too big for my tank. It is illegal to release that snakehead into a body of water.
Yeah.
It is not illegal in any state, in any location that snakeheads, bullseye, or northerns exist to catch a snakehead and release it immediately back to where you caught it. It is not illegal.
Right.
That is.
I think the
Virginia
wording.
Virginia and Maryland spell it out beautifully on their website. They say we recommend you kill it.
It's a
but
suggestion.
there will be no legal action taken if an angler catches and releases a snakehead.
They keep it very vague in other areas. I know you probably saw this just very recently, like within the last 2 weeks. There's been like some stories of them popping up in Louisiana for the first couple sightings in Louisiana, and it's like strongly urged to kill this fish. There's a big difference between that and anyway.
They've been in the Mississippi for like 8 years now. Like they found them in a handful of places all up and down the Mississippi. So
I feel bad for y'all. Like it's such a bigger battle topic in everywhere other than a place like Florida. Like our state is so far gone. Everybody here loves snakeheads. Nobody cares.
I still once in a while. Dude, I have fished like y'all's freshwater stuff very little, like twice.
People here love everything.
I still laugh at people that are like, the snakeheads ruined our waterways. I'm like, explain to me how you would ever prove that. It's like, you mean to tell me out of all the fish in the canals, so like
canals,
bass, like 8,
it's not a real ecosystem anymore. It's long gone. It's
like peacock bass, like dozens of different cichlid species, pacu, like clown knife fish, like there's arapaima once in a while talking like they're getting caught out of that stupid hatchery place. Like
people are stealing them and releasing them into the rivers and stuff. Yeah.
But like you name all these fish and you're like, yeah, it was the snakehead. That's what did it.
Like, I will say, like being down here, like those people that say that are very rare. Like it's nice to see this more so than anywhere I've ever been because I've moved my whole life. Most people down here are very like accepting of gar, bowfin, all the exotics. They just don't care. Like people do not stomp things. There's a few.
Like you'll get
a few of them.
I feel like y'all are like numb to it now because your freshwater is so, like you said, just so screwed. Like if
nobody
you ever
cares.
wanted to get it back, you would just have to poison the whole ecosystem and start over. Like there's nothing you can do at this point.
Right. Well, you look at the environment that our snakeheads live in. And again, this is not about Florida, but it's like, it's not like where you're at, where it's like wild river systems. Everything's already been altered. All of South Florida below Lake Okeechobee is just like flood control systems and water management. Yeah. There's just like dams and levees and pump stations and water control management systems. There's no lakes or rivers. It's just canals already been altered and destroyed by development. There's still great fishery. You can still go to these straight long canals and catch hundreds and hundreds of fish. But anyway, y'all's snakehead topic is a very interesting one. It's one that you can really go way down the rabbit hole. But I want to kind of continue to move further into Virginia with the time that we have left. Because within that same river system, obviously, you have a world-class cat fishery. And I don't want to get too hung up on it's like it's a problem, but it's also an opportunity. The blue catfish thing, I want to like sidestep that sidebar conversation because it's just we'll get drowned out by it. You do have opportunities though to catch fish that are over 60, 70, 80, maybe even triple digit fish.
Yeah, there's been a few dozen over 100 pounds caught out of the James. I think one out of the Rappahannock and one out of the Potomac. Like the biggest fish get caught out of the lakes. That's just simple biology. It's like, oh, why would a fish get over 100 pounds when it has to swim in current its whole life? Where when it lives in a lake, it could just lay there and hang out and eat a few shad a day. And like the world record, the last 3 world records came out of Bugs Island, which is the lake, Bugs Island or Kerr Reservoir, but or Kerr Lake, whatever. It's on the border of Virginia and North Carolina. And yeah, it was like 107, 109, and 143 pounder all got caught out of there. There's been like 7 over 115 caught since the 143, but none of them weighed over 143.
That is one of those bizarre like record. Like, I don't know, like I remember in high school, like early in high school in South Carolina, I think Lake Moultrie or the Santee system still had the world record blue catfish, and it was only like 98 pounds.
Dude, the state
and then
record
in like
in
the
Virginia,
last 20 years, it just went boom, 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 and just
the state record in Virginia was 72 and a half pounds like my entire childhood. I mean, it was 72 and a half pounds, and it is now double that. Like, I mean,
that makes no sense.
I mean, until I was like 16 years old, the state record was 72 and a half pounds. And then one of my dad's buddies caught a 75, and on the way to get it certified, he heard that someone caught an 86. And it was like, crap. They caught him on the same day. And then like a week after the 86 got caught, somebody caught a 90. I was like, what is going on?
It makes you wonder if we're going to see a day. Like, it makes you wonder if we're going to see a day where like 180 pound, I say 200 pound catfish.
Like we said, we'll kind of keep the blue cat talk short, but I can tell you the blue cats have become a problem now because back then, like a 48-inch blue cat would be, I don't know, 75 pounds, whatever. Now a 48-inch blue cat weighs like 55 pounds. There's so many blue cats in some of these rivers now that the science is showing that they're out competing each other. They are decimating the food source to where they're not growing like they were. The heyday was 15 to 20 years ago. And it was like when they really matured and they were just in the rivers, at least. The lakes seem like they're in their heyday right now. But the rivers, you're seeing the catch rate is up, but the size is, 80 pounders are like, they'll make paper, but you know what I mean? 80 pounders like turn heads again, where 10 years ago, these guides were catching an 80 pounder almost every day. And now it's like you bring one in that weighs 80 and people are like, oh man, that's a giant. Whereas that fish, very likely 20 years ago, an 80 pounder with the same length and build as that other fish probably could have weighed 100. They're just not, you can just look at them. They're not built like they used to be. You used to see these fish that are 48 inches long and guys are holding them like they're holding a whiskey barrel. Like they're just so fat. And you just don't see them looking like that anymore. Yeah. I think you're really seeing the state has taken some notice into it. There's some legislation, kind of rumors going around that something's going to happen this year. But I think everyone knows something needs to be done. It never fails. There was a couple viral videos from the Northern Bay where somebody walked out at night and turned on their flashlight, and it was just literally like old men used to say, you could walk on them. You literally could. You literally could. And then the next best thing, if you're in the Chesapeake Bay and you want to piss somebody off, just talk about something screwing up the blue crabs. And somebody posted a picture of like a 30-pound blue cat they caught, and it had like 40 blue crabs in its belly.
Oh, and they were like, totally see that.
They were like, you want to know why crabs cost $180 a bushel? Here it is. They're they're all in the catfish stomach. And everybody went berserk. Like everybody went nuts, and now everyone hates them all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
That's funny. Well, those catfish, like the blue catfish is cool because it's got like the monster fish element, the giant monster. But y'all's real incredible one is those flatheads, and it's the
Yeah,
one like you very
they're my
recently
favorite
you
too.
posted a photo in like those rapids in rocks in like this wild looking terrain where there's like white water behind you, massive boulders, and you're fly fishing for these giant predatory catfish.
Yeah,
That is badass. That is
yeah,
like
that
something like I will pay money to go do. Tell me
that
about
will
that
probably
fishery.
be that'll probably be my fish of the year. I mean that I've been doing that on and off for like probably 10 years, maybe a little longer now. I mean, we've been fishing for them in the spring and targeting them with the artificials and doing that kind of fishing now for it's about 12 years, maybe a little longer,
Hmm.
and really, really, really dialing it in like the last 7 or 8. But you, the fly fishing was always part of it because I'm like, I could easily catch these on a fly doing the same thing. And it's not easy because it's real technical. You got to get the fly down, and it boils down even to me tying the flies for specifically for the purpose. And the fly line needs to be correct. You need to have a leader that's built right, and there's a lot of technical stuff that goes with it. But it's just it's a fishery that doesn't exist anywhere else, as far as I know. I mean, in the spring, these catfish follow up our migratory shad species and herring that run up the
Okay.
rivers, and that's what gets them there. They're
Because I
waiting for
was
the water to
wondering
get warm.
why they were doing it. I was like, is this a
Yeah,
spawn thing? I didn't know what
it
was
is.
driving the movement.
It's it's pretty much 50-50. The ultimate goal is to spawn, but what's getting them there is like, oh, it's time to spawn. I need to eat. So they're
Oh,
like
okay. Yeah.
following these shad and herring, and as the river spikes, the shad and herring use that. See, where we live is right on the fall line, so you have all the rocky mountainous areas of the river. They funnel down right to Richmond, Virginia, or right to Fredericksburg on the Rappahannock, or right to Washington D.C. on the Potomac.
Mhm.
All those cities are on the fall line because humans are lazy. We
Yeah.
we migrate or we sailed up the river and got to those rocks. We're like, well, here looks good, and we
Yeah.
just dropped anchor and we built a city here. Well, those fish, the shad get to the fall line where the terrain begins to steepen, and you're leaving the tidal area of the river, and they bottleneck. So the
Mm.
shad get there and they're like, crap, I don't want to swim through all that garbage. Like, look at all those rocks, look at all those rapids. That's gonna suck. So they
Yeah.
sit there and wait for what happens every spring. We get spring floods. You get a lot of rain up in the mountains. It comes down the river spikes, and the shad are like, yo, this is way easier. Now they swim up the river. And the flatheads do the same thing. They're like, oh man, all our food's leaving. So they chase it. The river comes down, and now the flatheads are in all these rocky areas of the river. They school up real heavily behind dams and various stuff. This area of the river from Richmond up for about 10 miles, there's like 15 dams. Now most of them are blown
Mm.
up, but they create some cool eddies and current seeds and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's what they like to spawn in. They like to spawn in that hard gravelly bottom or sandy gravelly bottom, but they'll use any structure they can find. They'll get behind a rock, they'll get under a tree, they'll the same kind of stuff flatheads do in the middle of the country when you see these guys noodling.
Yeah.
But we have the cool advantage of there being clear flowing water where you're catching them, and it's just a really diverse place, really different style of fishing. And there's actually a couple local guys. All of the fly fishing world records were caught in the James. They were all caught here,
Oh.
like all of the tippet records. And actually one dude has like 4 of them. He's actually who got me started on it. Never really like specifically showed me spots per se, but like I had an idea where the fish were anyway. And I was like, how are you catching them on fly? And he's like, oh, I use a 10 weight, then I go up, throw big weighted flies. They don't really seem to care. They definitely care now because they're getting a lot more pressure, and a lot of people
Yeah.
have kind
That's what I
of,
was curious about.
the YouTube game. You got guys who don't really respect it, blowing
Mm.
it up, but it is what it is. But yeah, these fish have gotten harder to catch, whereas I used to be able to just drag any old bait fish fly past them. Now I've got to drag something that looks good, and I got to work it. Actually, I mean, most of my fish I'm catching are on game changers, big flashy, well swimming flies, and it's fun when it works, but it doesn't always work. I mean, the situation has to be right to catch them on fly. You can't go out there when it's dirty and high and expect to get them on fly, because we don't have the benefit of scent or vibration or like a big boot tail on the back of a swim bait that creates a feeling for it. They got to see it. That's the only way. And it's a catfish. They don't see very well. So
that's interesting. Yeah,
it's a cool fishery, man.
Once you, and they're such a powerful fish. I mean, I would think hooking them in that terrain is just like, are they going downstream? Are they stupid and trying to head against the current? Like, what are they doing?
The trick with the fly is you can't really fish upstream and fish the fly back like we do with the other gear. If you throw a fly upstream, typically they don't sink fast enough and it'll just be back to your feet in no time. So what gets hairy is you kind of have to wade up, and that's part of the reason why the conditions have to be right, is because you have to be able to get up to them and swing the fly down and bring it back. Yeah. And it's tricky. I mean, it's just a weird set of circumstances you need for the fly. And there's been some years where it never happens, where you can't get them on fly. It doesn't line up. Once they start spawning, they won't bite anything, period. They lock down. Okay. But the fly, it's violent, man. I mean, their fight is strong. When you catch them downriver fishing up, they always swim upstream. They fight you away from you. And when they start losing momentum, they'll use the current to their advantage and they'll run downstream. Yeah. But with the fly, I'm typically hooking them from above them, so that it's funny. It's like it throws them for a loop. You hook them and they're like, they don't want to swim towards the pressure. So they start swimming up sideways in the current. And that particular fish you're talking about, the one that I posted, that fish was one of the most crazy fish fights I've ever had in my life. I mean, awesome. I threw the fly behind this tree where there's a big eddy and stripped it twice. And the fish actually, like, I had seen the fly still because of where the seam was. I was trying to strip it into the seam and let it fall into the seam. Yeah. And right when it came over the seam, I see this big green and gold flash just boil on it and miss it completely. I'm like, what was I knew what it was, but I'm like, oh my God. And I like a rookie, I like stripped the fly out of the zone. And I'm like, crap, what are you doing? I picked it up. That's the nice thing about a fly. The fly is 50 feet away. I can pick it up and throw it right back where it was. Picked it up, plopped it back in the water, and then you just see this mouth, and it's just like thud. I'm like, oh man, that's her. Drilled her, like hard strip set, and it's just nuts. Tail slaps the surface. She's going every direction, and she swam down to the bottom of the hole. And I'm like, I'm actually feeling pretty good, because I'm like, it's just a big hole. Like, she can't really break me off. Mm-hmm. There's this one big rock, and I'm going to use the typical sign. I mean, it's true this time. It's the size of a Volkswagen, like everyone likes to say. But no, there's a big rock in the center of the pool that's that size. And I'm used to fighting from the bottom of the pool, and that rock doesn't come into play. But from the top of the pool, I'm like, oh, crap. She swam down, and it was funny. She was literally fighting me from where I would normally be standing and fishing. Like, this is just, she's teasing me. But she kept getting behind this rock and diving behind it. And at one point, we were just at a stalemate. Like, I would pull her, and then she'd go. And I'd pull her, and she'd go. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking. I'm like, I got Jeremy Wade this thing. This is the only thing I can do.
Like the Goonch episode? Did you get...
Oh, dude, it was about to be. And I reached behind me onto the rock and grabbed, I have one of those Yeti book bags that I like to wear, and they're watertight, airtight. So I'm like, I'm going to throw that on my back, because I had my camera and had all my stuff in it. So I'm going to throw that on my back, and I'm jumping in, and I'll just float through the current seam below her, and then she's screwed. I got her. And I got no sooner. I got that bag on my shoulder, and I'm like, all right, here goes. I was like a half second from stepping in the water, and she's just like, all right, I'm done. And she just swam out away from the rock. And I'm like, oh, wait, I got a second. And I just
the guardian angels pushed her out of there, because like, you were doomed.
They were like, you're going to die. Don't do this. No, right when she swam out into that current, I just straight rodded her. I just pointed the fly rod right at her and just started cranking on the reel. I was like, I'm either going to break you off, or I'm going to get you in front of that rock. And once I got her in front of that rock, it was pretty much over. She fought me at my feet for a few minutes, but she didn't have anywhere to go after that.
Well, phenomenal photos. I remember when I first saw them, I was like, man, what a great shot. I'm all for a great fish photo.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, I don't know where else you can see. Like catfish are always cool looking in photos, but you just don't see it in that kind of environment. I'm like, that's the shot. Like that's the photo right there.
And that's what really bothers me with these guys blowing that fishery up, man. They just too many people got spoon fed this fishery, and they don't understand that this doesn't happen elsewhere. It happens here. And I mean, it's not that hard. I love seeing people out there fishing for them. I like to see people experiencing that kind of fishing, but it's like you need to be able to respect it. Like, you know, it's one thing to go out there and fish for them, but it's like, did you really need to record a YouTube video walking to the spot and like where you park and all? Like, why? Like, why did that have to happen? So I don't know. And it's gotten more and more popular. I mean, we have guys, surf fishermen from like New York, coming down here to catch these things on like surf gear. It's kind of funny.
Well, surf gear, I think I've seen some of that, and I've heard some of the banter between you and Josh about it. It is kind of a funny looking. I don't know. The photos don't make a lot
of those guys because they are 100% doing it for the photo. They're let me bring my van stall and my
I saw that. I was like, that doesn't seem very applicable to that environment, but
it's like I have my van stall and my 11-foot custom surf rod.
Surf
and I've
casting.
got my surf belt and my plug bag on my shoulder. Meanwhile, I'm casting like 25 feet.
I don't understand that part.
But. It's actually like you wouldn't know that looking at the photos. That's the thing. But like, it's so goofy. Josh calls them the Go-Go Gadget Mod Talk. They got like more shit hanging off of them than anything. And it's like, bro, like, it's just funny when you go back to like when Josh and I first started doing this, we were catching them on like bass rods. These guys are out here with like shit to tame a whale. And it's like calm down. Let's take it a little easy here.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Well, I know we're creeping up on time, sort of. I'm happy to keep going because there's no way we can cover all of Virginia. It's just, it can't be done because we're still not even like in an interior part of the state.
We're like right now we're in central Virginia.
Yeah, because y'all have
2.5 hours, 3 hours west.
Yeah, y'all have your trout fishery, and you have. I understand the smallmouth fishery is a real interesting topic. You know, I've done enough research and listened to other podcasts, and I know that's like kind of that's like a hot button topic, if I'm not mistaken. The change.
Yeah, our trout fishing, other than our brookies, you know, one cool thing about Virginia with the trout fishing, Virginia has, by stream mileage, we have the most native brook trout water anywhere in the world in terms of one spot. It's just when you get above a certain elevation, if you see a blue line on a map, it's got brook trout in it. Like that's what's kind of cool. There are state fish, and sure they don't get big, but there's something about hiking in 2 miles and, you know, trudging through the woods and fishing a stream that's not even half as wide as the room I'm sitting in right now. And the fish are just gorgeous, man. I mean, I've never been one of those guys who was like, it's about the journey, not about the fish. Like, no, it's about the fish. But with the brookies, it really is. They're so pretty, and it's just one of those fish. I make 7, 8, maybe as many as 10 trips a year for native.
You need the fish at the end of it.
Yes.
But I would compare that to like
trip that you get skunked sucks. Anyway, we were saying about the smallmouth. We got on a trout tangent there, kind of weird. Yeah. But what I was saying, the thing with the trout is most of our trout are stocked. You know, our browns and rainbows are stocked. We have 2 blue ribbon caliber wild trout streams like that have good brown and wild reproducing browns and rainbows in them. But overall, the state of Virginia, trout fishing is brookies or stockers. I don't fish a lot of stock trout stuff. It's just not my thing. But the smallmouth, we have in the past, and growing up, that's what I grew up doing with my dad was smallmouth fishing. I mean, we had a canoe, put the canoe in, go upriver and fish behind dams, fish for, I mean, you name it, just fish a lot of places. And all the rivers, every single river in Virginia, tidal river that has a fall line, has smallmouth, and truly world-class river smallmouth fishing. But we're in that situation where smallmouth are not native here. They are a stocked fish. Most of our sport fish in Virginia are stocked fish. Now, granted, they were stocked back in the 70s and they've been naturally reproducing forever. But you get to that weird point where, like, Mother Nature occasionally shows you they're not supposed to be here. They spawn in early April, mid-April, sometimes as early as late March if you have a warm spring. But you'll occasionally see them spawning into late April, early May, just depends. But what happens every year in the spring? You get a lot of rain.
Yeah.
So these fish are trying to spawn and they're making beds. It's their natural instinct to spawn at this water temperature at this time. And then you get a flood that washes the bed away. And those fish don't spawn again. That was their try for the year. Like, okay, let's try again next year. We had 15 years straight. You can ask some of these guides. Everyone likes to say, oh, it's the flatheads, it's the catfish. They ate all the smallmouth. No. We had 15 years of terrible spawns because we had these huge floods. And we had this just drastic age gap in our smallmouth now. It has made a massive comeback. I mean, it's still nothing like it was 10 years ago, but the numbers are slowly but surely coming back because we've had 4 good dry springs in a row. So the smallmouth had a nice healthy spawn. You get a lot of fry, you get a lot of survival, and they're coming back. A lot of the places I used to fish, you could go out there, catch the same numbers you used to, but they're smaller.
Yeah.
But we have this crazy age gap where we just have super giant smallmouth, like 22, 23. They're a very, very good friend of mine caught a no doubt state record smallmouth on a fly with another good buddy of mine, guide, on a bug, on topwater, on a fly rod. This fish was 25 and a half inches long, smallmouth bass, in a river. You can look on his Facebook page has it as his profile picture. It is the largest smallmouth I've ever seen. And it's built like a Lake Michigan smallmouth. It looks like just a football and it's 25 inches long. But like we don't have many of that caliber, but we have a lot of like 20 plus inch smallmouth. And then there's like those like mid to high teener fish like don't exist. Like 14 to 17 inch fish, there's so few. But then you have just billions of little ones. So those little ones are hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years are going to get our fishery back to where it was. Our smallmouth fishing when I was growing up was unbelievable. I mean, it was spectacular.
Where are they? And this is kind of like the last species I wanted to hit up on because it's one that's very interesting to me. Still kind of like a top tier bucket list fish.
Yeah.
I almost feel like I shouldn't be leaving the country without catching one first. But like, where are the smallmouth in conjunction with y'all's musky fishery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The musky live in typically the western reaches of the rivers. They need colder water, so they definitely need to live closer to the springs and the mountainside of the state. They share the water with the smallmouth. Everywhere musky are has smallmouth, but not everywhere smallmouth are has musky. Okay. Smallmouth can handle that warmer water. We catch smallmouth even a few miles into the tidal water, so like well past the fall line. But from the fall line up all the way into the far, far western reaches of the state, if you look at the Virginia on a map, there's one particular interstate that runs down the left side of the state. It's Interstate 81. Typically, when you get around Interstate 81, give or take a few miles on each side, and then everything west of 81 is where the muskie are going to be.
Okay.
So like the James River, when you get way out west of the James, pretty much the entire length of the New River that's in Virginia. The New River actually is a cool river, supposedly the second oldest river in the world or the country, but it actually flows north. It's a wild river. It's one of the only rivers that does it. It's on the western side of the Blue Ridge Mountains or the Appalachians, and it flows through Virginia to the north into West Virginia and makes its way into the Ohio, which then flows into the Mississippi. So once you get on the other side of the Blue Ridge, we have a river in Virginia that meets the Gulf. That's just a little piece of trivia for you there.
Nuts.
But yeah, the New, pretty much the whole length of the New in Virginia has them, and the western reaches of the James, and then the western reaches of the Potomac. I don't honestly, I don't know if the Western Rappahannock has them. I don't think it does. But the Potomac, the James, the New, and then the Shenandoah. The Shenandoah beats the Potomac. But yeah, that's typically all your musky rivers.
And is that a pretty like well received or revered species, or are people like they're eating all the smallmouth?
Well, those guys exist, but the thing is, I mean, the muskie have been here just as long as the smallmouth have. Maybe not quite, but within reason. I mean, they've been here long enough to where you can't make that argument. I mean, the smallmouth fishing has been excellent forever, and the muskie have been here too. I mean, it's just that biology. Apex predators rarely destroy an ecosystem. You know, it doesn't do them any good to eat all of their food. Like, it's just not how it works. Makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, they muskie and smallmouth share the ecosystem. Muskie kind of peter out as you get further east. Like it's really rare to catch a muskie, I would say, within an hour and a half of Richmond. I mean, the Shenandoah is 2 hours away, but like if you think of the James, if you just head west an hour and a half, you're not quite to muskie territory yet. You gotta get a little further west.
Are you really making a lot of trips for them anyway? It seems like you kind of have to bypass. I'm like, you especially got to bypass so much other awesome fishing opportunity to get to this one fish that probably won't even eat.
Yeah, Josh and I talk about that all the time. We love fishing for them. It's one of my, I mean, I've got like $500 worth of musky tackle out in my garage. Like it's kind of frustrating, but not musky tackle, just baits. It's kind of frustrating, but like, it's one of those things, you know, Josh and I do the master angler program in Virginia, and I'll save that for like your discussion with him, because that's like his big thing, and mine too. We're both big into it, you know, 30 freshwater species, different trophies and stuff, and he's a few ahead of me. He's at 24, I'm at 22. But either way, we both got our muskie, and Josh does a lot less fun fishing than I do. I like when the summer gets here, I've got the species I want to mess with, and he still stays on the grind chasing the species. And like I kind of take a little bit of easier approach at it. I'm like, when it's the best time to target them, I'm going to go. I don't want to like force it. And the muskie, we can't target them in the summer. I mean, you can, but it's not wise. When the water gets over 75, it's really dangerous to muskie. A lot of them die.
I could probably kill them. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot. They won't die from living in the water, but they'll die from the stress after you catch them. So typically after late May, early June, nobody messes with them anymore. But then like you get into that habit of, okay, let's go in October, November. The places where they are in the state is such high elevation, the weather starts to suck. And like, muskie fishing really is, it's a cold weather game. And if you want to fish for muskie and catch them, the weather a lot of times needs to be crappy. Like they like to eat in the crappy weather.
Well, I know your buddy Blaine kind of put them on the map in y'all's state.
I mean, I'm really lucky to have Blaine as a friend. We met on a boat, cobia fishing together with a mutual friend of ours, and his eyes lit up when he heard that I fished for snakehead. He's like, "You catch those?" I'm like, "Yeah, quite a bit." He's like, "You got to take me." He's like, "I'm dying. It's like one of my favorite fish, like that I've never caught." He's like, "I want to catch one so bad." And I was like, "All right." And we met right before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened and he couldn't travel anywhere. So he did this whole year of just like, I'm going to explore my home state, learn and love what's in my backyard. And I think we fished together like 20 times that summer. It was like it never failed. It was like every Thursday I'm driving the UPS truck and hanging out. Here's my phone. Answer the phone. Like, what's up, man? He's like, you fishing this weekend?
We haven't even mentioned the UPS thing. That's like one of the coolest things about your characters. Like, you know, we're sitting here, we're talking about all this unique fishing. I thought about
wearing my uniform.
Yeah. Because like people are probably like, what does this guy do for a living?
It would have even been funnier if I wore my uniform. We just never mentioned it.
But the fact that like, I love the fact that you're, you know, I don't know, man. That's just like, you know, you're working. Like you got your job, but then you have what you're passionate about and you still are able to make it happen. But
yeah, the nice thing about, you know, being union like we are at UPS, there's occasionally that time where you want to go fishing and you go into work and it's just like, you got less seniority than me, buddy. Looks like you're running my route today. Just go on home. Like,
oh, geez.
Usually, though, those lower seniority guys, they don't get to work every day. So, like, they're more than happy to run the route because they make the money. But
I earned these brown socks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, actually.
Oh, geez. That's funny. Well, the musky thing. I knew I had to touch on that. That's just
yeah. You ought to come up here, man. I mean, they are the fish of 10,000 casts. They're really not in these rivers. They're not as hard to catch as they are in like a lake. We catch them. We typically catch them when we go. I mean, it's not like we can't guarantee a muskie. You ought to come up here and do that with us in like October, November. It's prime time, but it's one of those things. I mean, I feel like even when it's that cold and that miserable, that whole like embrace the suck is like a real thing. Mm-hmm. At some point, you get to that point where you're like, I love this. I love how terrible this is.
It's always awesome when it's over. It's like, that was awesome. I'm tough. But dude, nobody sees how much you're bitching.
There's no better feeling in this world, and I will challenge anybody. An 8 p.m. just scalding hot shower in like a Hampton Inn after you've just been frozen solid while you were musky fishing, and then to like get out the shower and plop yourself in the bed, and you're like, I don't care what's on TV, but this is the greatest moment of my life. It's like next hour, dude. It's eating like Taco Bell in a hotel room, trying to warm back up. There's such a rewarding fish, man. I don't know, honestly, if there's much more rewarding of a fish out there. You put in that much work. They're physically demanding. It's cold. It's the baits are heavy to throw. It's actual work to fish for them. And then you catch one, and it's
just another one of those like uniquely American species or North American species that's like you've got to get one, and it's like. That's an awesome fish. That's one I got to do within the next year, I think. But I think one of the last things I was curious about, I kind of like wrote it down and circled it because I never. It seems like every like 10th post of yours is like promoting this like RVA bugs and brews thing. Yeah. Like, what is this? Like, tell me about that.
It's, me and my buddy Jacob. Richmond is just an amazing fly fishing hub. You've got any species you want. So where there's fly fishing, there's fly tying, and a lot of these big name fly shops in the Midwest, and specifically like Schultz Outfitters up in Michigan, started this thing called like bar flies. And you just once a month meet at a bar and bring your tie and stuff, and everybody just sits around and ties flies and bullshits and tells lies and fishing stories and all that shit. And it's fun. I mean, it's just a good way to get everybody together and see. I mean, a lot of people fly fish. Overall, fly fishermen are almost a little more reclusive. You don't see a lot of like groups of fly fishermen out wading the river together. It's usually singular people or maybe just like a couple dudes together, but you don't see like 4 kids in high school get together, load up the truck and go fly fishing. Like this area doesn't seem like that happens that much. So it was cool to like get everybody together. And those first couple years, we were killing it, man. I mean, 25, 30, 40 people at each meeting each month. And then we started bringing guests in. Like we had some local guides, some fly shop owners, and just guys who wanted to promote their own business. And it's not like we try to stress. This isn't like a tying class or anything. It's just show up, buy whatever you want. Prefer if you buy some food and buy a beer or something because the place lets us come for free. We have it at Legends Brewing down in south side of Richmond. It's crazy that it didn't already exist, with how much we have at our disposal right here in the city. And it was cool to see like how well the group kind of formed because it was people of all kinds and ages. Like we had kids as young as like 10 and 11 years old show up with their parents. Yeah. And then we had like some of these older guys from like some of these sort of snooty fly fishing clubs around. And even a few of them showed up. And it was like, cool to see that it was received well by everybody.
Yeah. And that sounds awesome.
I mean, it's a once a month thing. First Tuesday of every month, if anybody's listening.
Yeah, that's cool. There's a lot of value in like real community. I think too many guys are existing strictly in these like internet communities, and it's like not a healthy. It's not like a healthy space to live in. So it's like you gotta have real relationship with folks.
I've met 3 or 4 guys who I would consider maybe as many as like 5 or 6 guys that I would consider that are like good, fishing buddies now since I've started this. And it's cool just to, add people to the friends list like that, but like really your friends, not like, oh, we talk on Facebook a lot, joke around, like actual in-person, fishing buddies is kind of a cool thing to have.
Man, you meet a couple of other like-minded, like strong, passionate anglers, and it's like,
oh yeah,
you elevate way more than you like could have done by yourself. It's like there's a lot of value in surrounding yourself with other guys that are like-minded.
Well, it's
you can only get so far like single-handedly by yourself.
It's like me and Josh have pretty much the same story that you and Josh have together. It's like you meet somebody that has the same like drive to do something as you do, and you like feed off each other when you're fishing. And like it's one of those things, if him and I are going to go try and figure something out new, I mean, it's nice to go together because like he has a different background than I do. Like I kind of came up from bass fishing and pond fishing and that side of fishing, the more artificial game, where Josh, most of his boundaries were built from the catfishing and like live bait and bait fishing side of things, which people can hate on all they want, but there's just as much technique and skill involved in the live bait game as there is in the artificial game. And it's nice to have his style of fishing and my style of fishing together to really like piece the puzzle together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I probably cut from a similar cloth. I mean, the bait thing, it's like, it's one thing if you go to a bait store and you purchase bait. It's another if you show up at the water with nothing. Yeah. And it's like part of your day is, first you have to have an understanding of the forage species in the area and how to catch them. Because like, I don't know, man, it's like when you get good at understanding the natural forage items that live in a river system and using them as bait, then when you show up with lures and you understand what these fish are really going after, you can get, it's another one of those weird ones where you can become a better lure fisherman by getting good at not so much bait fishing, but like bait harvest and bait. All like
that knowledge comes together. Like all of it's part of the same puzzle. It's like, that's actually how Josh and I really started fishing together, was the summertime flathead fishery we have in Richmond. The whole day is built around, in the morning, you got to go catch bluegill. You got to fill a bucket or fill a bait bucket with bluegill.
You can't catch bluegill, your day's done.
Yeah, you're screwed. You're started. Your day never started. So we go catch bluegill first thing in the morning, and then go out and float them for catfish during, in the river during the day. And that was like the stuff we really started doing together a lot when we met, built off of it from there. That's his favorite fish in the world, is those flatheads. Right. So.
Well, I can see why. That's an awesome species. But same thing, though, like, if you make a trip down in Florida, that's kind of the nature of this whole thing when you start meeting people and you can benefit off of one another. I've been up to Virginia numerous times fishing your waters, but if you're ever down here, I think you'd have a lot of fun with our bullseye snakeheads, with any of that stuff.
I'd love to do it.
It's different. It's weird. It's fun. It's different. It's a lot of like guerrilla warfare, run and gun, jumping behind dumpsters, hopping fences. It's a totally different, it's fun in a different, unique way. But anyway,
fighting off banana wielding crackheads.
Yeah. Pulling it from mysterious locations.
Yeah.
But anyway, dude, I always kind of end this the same way. How can somebody find you, like Instagram or whatever?
I primarily use Instagram the most. It's Grant Alvis _fly fanatic. It's kind of a long Instagram name. Grant Alvis. If you go on Instagram and type in Grant Alvis ALVIS _ it's going to pop up. I don't think anybody else has my name, so you'll see it.
Yeah, well, people got to check it out because the redfish, especially, I don't know, whatever your cup of tea is, it seems like Virginia has it, whether it's big toothy fish like a musky, whether it's trout.
If you like colossal redfish, you could go on there. If you scroll back to last summer, you can see my personal best is a 54.5 incher. That fish was special.
Well, all right, Grant, I'm going to hop off here. We're going to hit it right at the 2-hour mark, which is a good, engaging conversation. And we'll have to do it again another time because we're pretty familiar with each other. You and I more so than a lot of the other guys I've had on here. And there's so much to unpack in the kind of fishing you do, Josh do. They didn't even touch the kayak fishing, your new boat. It's impossible. You can't cover it all. But
I'd be down for a part 2.
Anyway, Grant, good talking to you. And we'll be in touch, man.
All right, buddy.
Thank you for listening to Boundless Pursuit. Tune in each week as we bring stories and insight from uniquely talented anglers and outdoorsmen. And if you enjoyed this show, I want to hear from you. Be sure to leave a 5-star review, as this is going to drive the growth and exposure of this show. And if you have feedback or guest suggestions, I would love to hear from you. And you can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com. For all other collections of media and contact information, please visit www.boundless-pursuit.com.